Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. She announced, "You are not in my league financially. Not husband material." She said it loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. Crystal glasses clinked, a few laughs slipped out, and my stomach dropped, but my face did not move. In front of her entire party, I replied, calm as a still lake, "You are right." I pulled out my phone, sent one short text, put face down on the bar, and finished my drink. Minutes later, when the helicopter touched down on the field next to the country club, her voice cracked over the sound of the rotors as she shouted my name. People rushed to the windows, phones out, eyes wide. They had no idea what was coming. My name is Desmond Reeves, and I am 28 years old. For the past 4 years, I have been running a tech company in Austin, Texas. Nothing flashy on the surface, just enterprise software solutions that somehow turned into a $50 million business. We help companies manage their data infrastructure, compliance, and systems reliability. It is not exactly the kind of thing that lights up a cocktail party conversation, but it pays the bills, and then some. The real lesson, though, had nothing to do with code or servers. I learned early that money changes how people see you, and usually not in ways that help you figure out who they really are. In my early 20s, I dated a few women who went from casually interested to aggressively enthusiastic the moment they learned what my company was worth. Suddenly, they cared about long-term plans, where I lived, what I drove, what kind of house I wanted to buy. It left me wondering whether they wanted me, or the lifestyle they imagined I could provide. That question never really left my mind. So when I met Serena a little over 14 months before that party, I decided to try a different approach. I would keep the wealth quiet. I would live the way I actually prefer to live, see how she treated me when she thought I was just another software guy making decent money, but nothing spectacular. I wanted to know whether someone could like me without the numbers attached. I met her at a coffee shop in South Austin, a place called Riverside Roasters on South Lamar. It was one of those spots where you can spend an entire afternoon without anyone bothering you. Just big windows, potted plants, and the smell of espresso hanging in the air. Serena sat in the same corner every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, books spread out across the table, studying for her business degree finals at the University of Texas at Austin. I had been going there for months, working on my laptop, taking calls, and half pretending not to notice her. We made eye contact a few times, that quick glance followed by both of us looking away like we had not been staring. Eventually, I got tired of my own hesitation. One afternoon, as she was flipping through a finance textbook, I walked over and asked if she needed a coffee refill. Serena looked up, and for a second I forgot what words were. She was beautiful, yes, but it was the focus in her eyes that stopped me. She smiled, tilted her head like she was assessing me, and said, "Sure, I could use a refill." I had been staring at discounted cash flow models for 3 hours. I laughed, partly from nerves, partly because that was the most honest opening line I had heard in weeks. We ended up talking for 3 hours that first afternoon, seated at her corner table with refills we barely touched. We talked about everything from Austin's rapid growth, to housing prices, to her family's long history in the city. Her great-grandfather had been a ranch owner back when land was cheap and plentiful, and over time that land turned into quite a bit of money. Her family still had serious wealth. Old Austin money with deep roots, the kind that comes with expectations, social calendars, and country club memberships. From day one, I could tell Serena was trying to figure out my financial situation, not in a cartoonish, gold-digger way, but like someone who had grown up around wealth and was used to filtering people by economic status. She asked subtle questions, like where I lived, what part of town my office was in, whether I liked to travel. When I gave vague but honest answers, I saw something flicker behind her eyes, like she was sorting me into a mental category. When I picked her up for our first real date in my gray Toyota Camry, I caught that flicker again. She stepped outside in a green dress and heels, looked at the car, and gave this polite but slightly tight smile. "Nice car," Serena said as she got in, her tone neutral, like she was evaluating something in a showroom. I had deliberately chosen the Camry over the black BMW parked beside it in my garage at home. It was a test, if I'm being honest. I wanted to see how she would react to dating someone who seemed solidly middle class instead of obviously wealthy. I could have pulled up in a luxury car and flashed all my success in chrome and leather, but I had already seen what that attracted. I wanted to see how she would act when she thought I was just comfortable, not rich. Over the next few months, I got what felt like a graduate course in how old money families think about economic differences. Serena was never outright cruel. She did not insult me to my face. She never said anything like, "You are beneath me." Instead, it was this steady drip of comments, always said with a smile, always framed as consideration, that revealed her mindset. "There's this amazing restaurant in Westlake," she said once when we were planning dinner, "but it is probably pretty expensive." She paused, watching my face, then quickly added, "We can just go somewhere more low-key." I did not want to pressure you. It sounded kind, but the implication was there. She assumed I could not afford what she could afford, and that she was being generous by lowering her expectations. Another time, Serena said, "My father might be able to introduce you to some people in tech who could help with your career. He knows a lot of venture capitalists and folks who do mergers and acquisitions. They might have some insight." She said it with this helpful tone, like I needed a guiding hand to climb to her level. She had no idea my company already had investors with bigger portfolios than her father's. After one especially pricey dinner that I chose, just to see what she would do, I suggested we split the bill. She smiled, almost approvingly, and said, "I love that you are so practical about money. Most men try to impress me by spending way more than they can afford. It is refreshing that you are realistic." I smiled and nodded, but inside it stung a little. She was not seeing me. She was seeing who she thought I was. Meeting her family took things to another level. Her parents, Denise and Gerald, live in a large house in West Austin, all clean lines, stone, and glass, the kind of place where even the landscaping looked expensive. When Serena first brought me over for dinner, they treated me like a pleasant side note. They were polite, friendly enough, but I could feel that they had already decided I was temporary. They asked basic questions about my work. "So, Desmond, what do you do?" Denise asked over a plate of salmon and roasted vegetables. "I run a software company," I said. "We build infrastructure tools for mid-sized and large companies." Gerald nodded like I had said I worked in retail. "That field is pretty competitive," he said. "Do you think it has long-term stability?" I explained briefly about recurring revenue and our client base. But as soon as I finished, he switched the conversation to someone's vacation home on the coast. Then there was her uncle, Reginald, the one everyone whispered about as the family's financial genius. He worked in investment banking. Early 50s, hair always perfectly lined up, suit tailored like it was measured with a laser. He had a way of talking to me like he was on a panel at a conference, and I was an eager intern. During our first meeting, Reginald said, "Software, huh? Very volatile space. I hope you're saving money for when the market shifts. Austin's tech scene can be brutal when things dry up. Smart young men keep their expectations realistic." He said realistic in a way that implied my ceiling was low and that he knew exactly where that ceiling sat. I never told him what my company was worth or how much equity I owned. In his mind, I was some lower-level startup employee punching above my weight by dating his successful niece. He seemed to enjoy reminding me of that dynamic at every family gathering. After a while, it got under my skin more than I wanted to admit. The strange thing was that I started to internalize some of it. Not because I doubted my success, but because being treated like you are less than in a particular environment eventually messes with your head. I would leave their house and find myself mentally defending my choices, my lifestyle, my decision to drive a modest car and live in a comfortable apartment instead of flaunting what I could afford. Serena never said anything directly critical, but patterns emerged. She would suggest a restaurant in a fancy neighborhood and then stop herself. "Never mind. We can go somewhere simpler," she would say. She would talk about dream vacations in Europe or the Caribbean, and then quickly pivot to more budget-friendly trips. She would mention something she wanted to buy, some expensive handbag or piece of jewelry, then joke, "Guess I will have to wait until I find a rich husband." It was always framed as a joke, as teasing, but each comment pushed the same idea, that she saw herself as financially secure and saw me as the man who might struggle to keep up. I was the one dating up. I was supposed to be grateful that she was so flexible about my situation. Over time, that dynamic wrapped itself around our entire relationship like invisible wire. Her graduation party was the night everything broke. Serena had been talking about it for weeks. "It is a big deal in my family," she said one afternoon, tapping a pen against her notebook at the coffee shop. Graduation parties, promotions, weddings, we go all out. My parents are throwing this huge celebration at Westwood Country Club. She sounded proud. I did not blame her. She had worked hard for that degree. She warned me a few days before the event. It is going to be pretty fancy, Serena said over the phone. Like really fancy. My family goes all in for these things. I just want you to be prepared so you are not surprised. I told her it sounded great and that I was looking forward to celebrating with her. What I did not tell her was that I had already been to Westwood Country Club several times for business events. For the past 2 years, my company had sponsored their charity golf tournament. I had shaken hands with board members there, signed partnership agreements in their private dining room, and listened to executives complain about cloud migration over cocktails. I knew that property better than she thought I did. I also knew that half the people at her party would recognize the name Reeves Dynamics if they saw it on a sponsorship banner. The night of the party, I showed up in my usual outfit for semi-formal events. Khakis, a crisp button-down shirt, and loafers. It was nice enough for most occasions, but I knew immediately that I was underdressed for this one. Men in tailored suits and polished shoes stood around sipping cocktails. Women floated through the room in gowns that looked like they came straight from high-end boutiques. Serena looked stunning. She wore a fitted black dress that probably cost more than my car payment, her hair styled in glossy waves, makeup done with a precision that made her look like she had stepped out of a magazine. When she saw me, she smiled, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You clean up nicely." Then she took my hand and started introducing me to relatives. "This is Desmond," she said again and again. "He works in software. Not, he runs a company. Not, he is a founder. Not, he is an entrepreneur. Just, he works in software," said with the same tone you might use if someone fixed phone screens or sold laptops at the mall. Each time, I noticed the quick calculation behind the relatives' eyes as they placed me on their mental ladder. The party itself was exactly what you would imagine for an old-money Austin family. A catered dinner with multiple courses. An open bar stocked with top-shelf everything. A live jazz quartet in the corner playing smooth, expensive background music. Servers floated through the room with trays of appetizers that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. I spent the first hour making small talk with the relatives. Most of them were pleasant enough in that polite, slightly distracted way people are when they do not plan to remember your name. They asked where I grew up, where I went to school, how I knew Serena. When I mentioned that we met at the coffee shop, several of them smiled like it was a charming little story about their niece dating a hard-working man from outside the circle. Reginald held court near the bar, as usual. He stood in a small group of men, swirling a drink in his glass, telling a story about his latest investment success. When he spotted me, he lifted his glass and motioned me over with a patronizing smile. "Desmond, good to see you again," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "How is the software business treating you?" "I cannot complain," I said. "We are staying busy." It was the same calm answer I always gave. It was true, and I liked it that way. He smirked slightly. "That is the spirit. Keep grinding," Reginald said. "Maybe you will work your way up to management eventually." A couple of his friends chuckled, not loudly, but enough that I heard it. The idea that I might actually be in charge of anything seemed mildly amusing to them. "The economy is tough for young people these days," Reginald continued, clearly enjoying the chance to lecture. "It is important to have realistic expectations about what kind of lifestyle you can afford." The words landed differently that night. There was something more pointed, more theatrical about the way he said them, as if he wanted his little audience to hear and agree. Around 10 o'clock, things shifted. I was standing near the bar, talking to one of Serena's cousins about Austin's startup scene, when Serena approached us. Her steps were a little less steady than usual, and the bright flush on her cheeks told me she had been drinking steadily all evening. She stopped in front of me and folded her arms, her voice pitched just a little too loud. "Desmond," she said, drawing out my name. "I think we need to talk." The tone was wrong. Heavy. Public. Conversations around us started to dim as people sensed drama in the air. Her cousin fell quiet and drifted back into the crowd. My chest tightened. I could feel the attention, subtle but spreading, like everyone was turning their chairs towards stage. "I've been thinking about us," Serena continued, every word measured but slurred at the edges. "About our future. And I just do not think this is working anymore." Several conversations stopped completely. I felt eyes on my back. Somewhere behind her, I saw Denise watching, her hand tightening around the stem of her wine glass. "We are in different places financially," Serena said, louder now, like she wanted to make sure no one missed the point. "We have different goals, different expectations about life." She gestured vaguely toward the room, toward the chandeliers and suits and polished silverware. "I need to be with someone who can match my ambition, someone who can provide the kind of life I want to build." My throat went dry. The humiliation was not accidental. She was not just ending a relationship. She was staging a performance, making sure everyone knew she was the one doing the rejecting, that she was the one setting the standards. A few of her cousins stood nearby, eyes wide, lips pressed together to hide uneasy smiles. "Good luck affording dinner without my father's help," Serena added, and a couple of people laughed, the kind of tight, uncomfortable laughter people give when they know they should not be laughing but cannot resist the moment. The cruelty of it hit me harder than the words themselves. She said it in front of people, like my supposed financial limitations were entertainment. That is when Reginald walked over, drawn by the scent of drama, like a shark to blood. He moved into the circle forming around us, his posture relaxed, his eyes gleaming. "Do not take it too hard, son," he said with that same patronizing smile I had seen all year. "Serena has standards to maintain. There are family expectations, you understand." He looked around at the gathering crowd, clearly enjoying the attention. "I'm sure you will find someone more suitable to your situation," Reginald continued. "Maybe in a few years, when you have gotten your career more established, you can try dating in this league again." He actually said "this league," and I watched the phrase land on faces around us. A ring of relatives stood there, watching this scene like it was dinner theater. Some looked entertained, some uncomfortable, some deeply invested in how I would react. I could feel my own heartbeat in my throat. There was a moment where I considered arguing, laying everything out, turning the entire thing into a shouting match. Instead, something inside me went very still. As Reginald smirked and Serena stood with her arms crossed, I felt a clear, sharp thought cut through everything. These people had spent 14 months evaluating me, judging me, slotting me into their mental hierarchy. And now, they were publicly celebrating that judgment. They believed they knew my worth, and they were proud of themselves for it. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and walked a couple of steps away from the circle. I scrolled to a contact named Trey Flight. Trey and I had met through a business associate. He ran a small charter service that my company used for fast trips between Austin, Dallas, and Houston. I pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. "What is up, Desmond?" he asked. The noise in the background told me he was still at the hangar. "You busy?" I asked. "I need a pickup from Westwood Country Club." There was a brief pause. "You are serious?" Trey said. "Absolutely," I replied. "Can you be here in 30 minutes? He chuckled, a low, knowing sound. "Text me the exact coordinates, and I will be there." I hung up, sent a quick message with the location, and slid my phone back in my pocket. When I turned around, I saw Serena watching me with a confused frown, Reginald still basking in his own performance, and several people whispering to each other. I walked back to them and said, calm and clear, "I appreciate the advice about knowing my league." Then I turned away. I walked to the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and took a slow sip. The next 28 minutes felt like an hour. I could feel eyes following me around the room. Some people looked smug, expecting me to slink out eventually. Others looked curious, wondering why I was not leaving. Serena hovered a few times on the edge of my vision, but I focused on my drink and the quiet hum of the jazz band. At some point, Serena came over and said more quietly, "You are really not going to say anything?" I looked at her and replied, "You said everything you needed to say." Her eyes searched mine like she was trying to decide if she regretted her words. Then someone called her name from across the room, and she drifted away again, drawn back into the safety of her circle. You could hear the helicopter before you saw it. The low, rhythmic thump of rotors started as a faint vibration in the air, then grew louder, making the windows tremble slightly. Conversations faltered. People turned their heads toward the tall windows, overlooking the field behind the club. "Is that a helicopter?" someone asked, their voice cutting through the murmur. The helicopter came into view, sleek and dark, descending toward the open field. As it got close enough to read, the logo on the side became visible in bold letters. Reeves Dynamics. My company's name. The same name that had been on sponsorship banners at that same country club for 2 years. The entire room went silent. I placed my empty glass on the bar, set a $20 bill beside it, and turned toward the exit. As I walked, a wave of whispers followed me. Is that his company? Reeves. Wait, that sounds familiar. No, that cannot be. Serena called out behind me, her voice small at first. Desmond, wait. I kept walking. She called again, louder this time, panic threading through her words. Desmond, wait. The noise of the rotors grew stronger as I stepped outside, the wind from the blades flattening the grass and tugging at my clothes. Trey sat in the pilot's seat, helmet on, giving me a thumbs up through the side window. The door on my side was already open, the step lowered. I walked across the field, feeling dozens of eyes on my back from the country club windows. Just before I reached the helicopter, I glanced back. Through the glass, I could see Serena, her parents, and Reginald among the crowd at the windows, all staring, faces pale, mouths slightly open. A few people had their phones out, already recording. Serena's hand was pressed against the glass, as if that could stop what was happening. I climbed into the passenger seat and pulled the headset on. As we lifted off, Trey said through the headset, "So, I'm guessing that was not a normal date night." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You could say that," I replied. From above, the country club looked small, like a diorama. In the wide window, I could still see a cluster of people pressed together, watching us lift into the night sky. If they were not already searching the name, Reeves Dynamics, on their phones, they would be in seconds. Sometimes the best response to being told you do not belong somewhere is proving, quietly and decisively, that you never needed to be there in the first place. As the city lights spread out beneath us, I felt the humiliation from earlier burning away, replaced by something cleaner. Not vengeance exactly, but relief. I had my answer about Serena and her family. No one could say it was unclear. The next morning, my phone buzzed earlier than usual. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, drinking coffee, and trying to decide whether to go into the office or work from home, when I saw a text from Trey. "You might want to see this," he wrote. He followed it with a screenshot his girlfriend had sent him. She worked events at Westwood Country Club. According to her, the party had turned into chaos after I left. The minute the helicopter cleared the field and the logo on the side became clear, people started pulling out their phones, typing furiously. Reeves Dynamics was not exactly a household name outside of tech circles, but we were pretty well known in the Austin business community. It did not take long for people to connect the dots. As guests found articles about our recent Series C funding round and my profile in the Austin Business Journal's 40 Under 40 list, the energy in the room shifted from smug to stunned. Conversations changed from jokes about me dating out of my lead to questions like, "Did anyone know he owned that company?" And "Wait, that was him." Serena lost composure almost immediately. When she realized what the logo on the helicopter meant, she apparently tried to run outside after it. In heels on that uneven lawn, staff members had to gently stop her at the door as the helicopter lifted away. Then she spent almost an hour crying in the country club bathroom, while a rotation of her cousins and her mother tried to calm her down. Denise was horrified. She was not just embarrassed. She was calculating the damage in real time. They had publicly humiliated someone who, it turned out, was not some young man trying to make it, but a multimillionaire founder whose company had supported the same country club's charity events. While Serena cried, Denise kept repeating, "We did not know. We did not know." Gerald immediately began researching my company on his phone. That was what the staffer said. He sat at one of the tables, scrolling through article after article, his expression growing tighter with each one. He was not just reading about my net worth. He was tallying up all the connections, all the people who respected my work, all the business relationships that now came with this story attached. Reginald's reaction was the most entertaining part from what I heard later. All evening, he had been introducing himself to guests as the uncle who was setting Serena's standards high, the man who had gently but firmly put the ambitious software guy in his place. The story worked fine until several of the guests, other business owners, executives, investors, spotted the logo, recognized my company, and realized exactly who he had been talking down to. By the end of the night, people were whispering to each other that Reginald Banks had just publicly humiliated one of Austin's more successful young entrepreneurs at his own niece's graduation party. For someone whose career depended heavily on networking and good judgment, it was not a great look. Some of his peers were less impressed than he had hoped they would be. The real kicker came from social media. One of Serena's cousins had filmed the helicopter pickup from the patio. The video showed me walking calmly across the grass toward the helicopter while Serena's voice echoed in the background, calling my name. The camera zoomed in on the company logo as the rotors kicked up dust, then panned back to the stunned faces at the window. That video went viral locally within hours. People tagged it with a hashtag about the helicopter breakup and shared it with captions about quiet confidence and never judge a book by its cover. Local news stations picked up the clip as a feel-good story about comebacks and assumptions. Within a week, it had over 1 million views and was being shared in business forums as an example of what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. My phone started lighting up. Friends sent laughing messages. Colleagues asked, "Was that really you?" Some investors texted things like, "Remind me never to underestimate your sense of timing." My leadership team had a group chat running where they swapped jokes about adding helicopters to our official brand. Serena called and texted constantly that weekend. At first, her messages were confused. "Why did you not tell me?" she wrote. "We could have avoided all of this." Then they turned apologetic. "I am so sorry. I was drunk. I did not mean it like that." Then desperate. "Please pick up. We can talk about this. This changes everything." That was the part she did not understand. The money did not change anything important. What she had shown me the night before, who she was when she believed I had nothing material to offer her, was exactly the information I needed. How she acted when she thought I was not wealthy revealed more about her character than anything she could say now that she knew the truth. Even Reginald tried to reach out. He called twice, left a voicemail about wanting to clear the air and discuss potential business collaborations. It was almost impressive how quickly his tone shifted from condescension to opportunity. One moment, I was a young man who needed to keep my expectations realistic. The next, I was someone whose assets he would very much like to be aligned with. The text from Denise was almost surreal. "Desmond, I hope you can forgive our family's behavior. We would love to have you for dinner this week to properly welcome you into our circle." Welcome me into their circle. After 14 months of treating me like a charity project, suddenly I was invitation worthy. The entire thing fell hollow. I spent most of that weekend at my actual place, not the modest apartment Serena had seen, but the penthouse I had bought downtown after our Series C round closed. Floor-to-ceiling windows, view of the city, a deck that overlooked the river. I had never brought Serena there. That was intentional. I had wanted to know how she treated me before she saw that version of my life. Sitting on the balcony with a glass of whiskey, watching the traffic slide by below, I replayed the entire relationship in my mind. Every helpful comment, every little joke about finding a rich husband, every time she had framed her flexibility about my supposed limited means as generosity. Now, with everything exposed, it was impossible to unsee the pattern. A few weeks passed. Serena's campaign to get me back did not fade. If anything, it grew more intense. She showed up at my office building one Tuesday morning, dressed sharply in a blazer and heels, carrying 2 coffees from Riverside Roasters. My assistant called to let me know she was downstairs. I told her to say I was in a meeting. Serena waited in the lobby for over an hour. Eventually, I went down, if only to keep her from arguing with security. She stood up the moment she saw me, eyes already glassy with unshed tears. "Desmond, can we please talk?" she asked. People at the front desk were pretending not to stare. "There is nothing left to talk about," I said quietly. "You made how you feel very clear." "I did not know," Serena insisted. "You cannot hold that against me. You never told me who you really were. You drove a Toyota. You lived in that small apartment. What was I supposed to think?" I looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and something colder. "You were supposed to think about how you were treating someone you claimed to care about," I said. "That was always the test." She frowned, frustration rising. "So this was a test?" Serena asked. "You set me up to fail? That is not fair, Desmond. You made me look like a fool." Her voice rose, and a few employees walking through the lobby slowed down to listen. "You made yourself look like a fool," I replied. "I just declined to correct you." After that, I asked security not to let her upstairs again. Serena tried twice more to get past the front desk, and my assistant had to step in. Eventually, Serena started alternating between tearful apologies and sharp accusations in her messages. "You are punishing me," she wrote once. "You know I love you. You are choosing your pride over us." Her family launched their own reconciliation effort. Gerald called 4 times, leaving voicemails about wanting to discuss strategic investment opportunities related to Reeves' dynamics. Denise sent flowers to my office, along with a handwritten note about family misunderstandings and how much they had always admired my work ethic. Reginald sent an email requesting a lunch meeting in which we could explore possible areas of mutual business interest, as if the last year had been a misunderstanding between colleagues. I declined every invitation, politely but firmly. I did not raise my voice. I did not send long messages explaining my decision. I simply said I was not interested and that I wished them well. It was not revenge. It was self-respect. Once you have seen how people treat you when they assume you have nothing, it is dangerous to forget it just because they now know you have something. The social pressure around me became its own kind of story. Mutual friends of ours reached out, some saying they understood why I walked away, others saying I should give Serena another chance. She was drinking, one friend said over the phone. People say things they do not mean when they have had too much. I listened but did not agree. A few of our mutual friends admitted privately that they had heard earlier comments Serena had made about my finances. Jokes about dating down, questions about how long it would take me to catch up, comments about me being solid but not spectacular. Those had not been accidents. They were part of how she saw the world. Alcohol had just turned the volume up. Serena took to social media, posting old photos of us together with captions about working through challenges and love being stronger than pride. Comment sections filled with people arguing about who was right. Some sympathized with her. Others pointed out that her behavior at the party had consequences. Watching from a distance, it felt like she was trying to rewrite history in real time. 3 weeks after the party, I went to dinner at Uchi downtown with a colleague to celebrate closing a new client contract. We were halfway through a flight of sushi when I heard a familiar laugh from across the restaurant. I glanced up and saw Serena at a table near the back, sitting across from a man who looked like he had stepped out of a wealth advertisement. Expensive watch, cufflinks that gleamed every time he moved his hands, voice loud enough for nearby tables to catch every word about his investment portfolio. "I manage several real estate projects around town," he was saying, leaning back with practiced ease. "We are looking at a mixed-use development near the river. Incredible upside. Very exclusive." Serena sat across from him, her expression polite but distant. She nodded at the right moments, but her eyes wandered, clearly bored. When she spotted me, her gaze locked, and something sharp flickered across her face. She excused herself and walked over to my table. "That man is a complete disappointment," Serena said as she reached me, lowering her voice but not enough to hide her frustration. "All he talks about is money and status. He keeps name-dropping people he barely knows. I miss being with someone real, someone with actual substance." I raised an eyebrow. "Someone real?" I asked. "You broke up with me in front of your entire family for not having enough money. Which part of that was about substance?" She winced slightly. "I know I messed up," Serena said. "You taught me what actually matters. Success is not about showing off. It is about character. That is why I fell in love with you in the first place. You fell in love with a version of me you had constructed in your head," I said quietly. "The humble, hard-working man who needed your family's connections to move up. You liked being the one who could open doors for me. But you never really knew me. You never asked deeper questions. You were too busy measuring me." Serena's eyes shone with tears. "Please, Desmond," she said. "We can start over. Now that everything is out in the open, we can be honest. I have learned from this. I'm not that person anymore." I looked at her for a long moment, then shook my head. "You are asking me to ignore everything I already learned," I said. "That is not growth. That is denial." Eventually, she went back to her table, leaving a faint perfume trail and a cloud of unresolved tension. I turned my attention back to my dinner, though the night felt different. That encounter did not make me angry. It just reinforced what I already knew. Serena was mourning the future she had imagined with the version of me she thought existed, not the person who had actually been there. Meanwhile, the story continued to ripple through Austin's business community. People talked. They always do. The helicopter video became a kind of local business folklore, a cautionary tale told at networking events and over coffee. Never assume you know someone's net worth. People joked. And never publicly humiliate someone until you have at least looked them up on LinkedIn. The consequences for Serena went far beyond our relationship. Dating became difficult for her. Wealthy men heard the story, saw the video, and decided they wanted no part of that kind of attention. They understood exactly what her meltdown at the party had revealed. Other men with more average incomes, heard the story and knew they would always be compared to the millionaire she lost, whether they wanted to or not. Her family's reputation took a hit too. Some of Gerald's business contacts quietly distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the spectacle. Reginald, especially, felt the fallout. A couple of potential clients canceled lunch meetings. One long-standing business relationship cooled noticeably. It is hard to sell yourself as a master of judgment and discretion when people have watched you publicly mock a successful entrepreneur you failed to recognize. Professionally, Serena's path got rocky. She interviewed for several positions at well-known companies in Austin. 3 job opportunities fell through after initial enthusiasm from the hiring managers. When those managers typed her name into a search bar, the top results were not her resume or her grades. They were articles and clips about the helicopter incident. Some companies decided they did not want that kind of publicity attached to an entry-level hire. Austin's business scene is smaller than it looks from the outside. People remember. Stories linger. The tale of the woman who publicly dumped a wealthy founder for not being in her league had become a parable people told interns and new hires when they talked about assumptions, humility, and long-term consequences. While all of that unfolded, my company kept growing. For months after the party, Reeves Dynamics went public. It was surreal seeing our ticker symbol on the financial news, watching the numbers jump in real time. The valuation settled just over $200 million. A few weeks later, I found out I had been included in Forbes' 30 Under 30 list for enterprise software innovation. The recognition felt earned because I knew where it had come from. Long nights, a small founding team that believed in the product, hard decisions about what to build and what to kill, and deliberate choices not to let money become my personality. I had built this without needing to show off, without relying on wealth as a social crutch. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I met someone new. Her name is Camille. She's an attorney who built her own practice from the ground up. We met at a panel discussion about data privacy and corporate responsibility. She was one of the speakers, and I was there to talk about how our software handled compliance. She asked sharp questions, pushed back when she disagreed, and made half the room think more deeply about what they were building. After the panel, we ended up talking in the hallway. Camille already knew about my company before she knew me personally. She had read some of the articles about Reeves Dynamics while researching clients. That gave the conversation a different tone. There was no guessing, no subtle testing about whether I could afford certain restaurants. She treated my success as a fact, not a prize. When I eventually told her the story about Serena, the graduation party, and the helicopter, I half expected her to laugh or shake her head. Instead, she listened quietly, then said, "Thank goodness you found out who she was before you married her." She did not ask for helicopter rides or flashy displays. She just asked whether I had learned what I needed to learn from it. The difference in how Camille approached everything was striking. She did not need my money. She did not want my money. She had her own clients, her own staff, her own schedule full of court appearances and negotiations. When I shared good news about a big contract or a successful product launch, she was genuinely happy for me. When she won a complicated case, I was just as excited for her. That was what an actual partnership looked like. 2 people with their own lives and accomplishments, supporting each other without trying to measure who brought more money or status. Our conversations were about strategy, ethics, and plans for the future, not about who was dating up or dating down. No one in her family treated me like a charity project or a temporary entertainment. About 6 months after the party, I was invited to speak at Austin Startup Week on a panel about building sustainable company culture. The room was packed with founders, engineers, investors, and students. The moderator asked about leadership, about handling growth, about staying grounded. I talked about transparency, about hiring people smarter than me, about building systems that outlast any single personality. As the panel ended and people started lining up to ask follow-up questions, I noticed a familiar face near the back of the room. Serena stood there, clutching a notebook and a tote bag with the company logo on it. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. Her hair was pulled back in a simple style, her clothes professional but understated. She waited while other people spoke to me. One of the organizers leaned over and whispered, "There is someone who has been trying to get your attention all afternoon. Do you want security to handle it?" I glanced over and saw Serena again, shifting from foot to foot. I thought about the party, the helicopter, the months of calls and messages. Then I thought about where I was now. If she tries to come up, just be polite and redirect her, I said. This is not the place. As the line moved, Serena tried to weave closer, but one of the staff members stepped gently between us. "I am sorry," he said to her. "Mr. Reeves has another session he needs to get to. You can leave a message with the event coordinator if you would like." She stared at me over his shoulder, eyes full of something between regret and stubbornness. I nodded once, then turned to the next person with a question about startup hiring. There was nothing left to say to Serena. Not because I was angry, not anymore. Anger had burned off months ago, like fog under the sun. What remained was clarity. I had seen exactly who she was when she believed I had nothing to offer. I had watched how her family treated me when they thought I was just the man in software. Those memories did not disappear just because they now knew the size of my bank account. Looking back, I am oddly grateful for the entire experience. The condescension, the public humiliation, even Reginald's smug comments about knowing my league. They stripped away any illusions I might have had about Serena and her world. They showed me how dangerous it is to let other people's assumptions define how you see yourself. They also taught me the value of quietly watching how people behave before you hand them access to your life. Serena thought she was dating down when she was with me. She thought she could do better than someone who drove a modest car and lived simply. She thought money flowed only one way in that relationship. The helicopter did not prove that I was worthy of her. It proved that she had never been worthy of the version of my life she imagined. In the end, no speech, no public explanation, no moral at the end of the story was necessary. The facts spoke for themselves. A woman and her family decided a man was beneath them because of what they assumed about his finances. They made that decision loudly, proudly, and in public. Then they watched a helicopter with his company's name on it lift him out of their orbit, leaving them exactly where they had always been. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.